Union Minister Dharmendra Pradhan on Monday introduced the Viksit Bharat Shiksha Adhishthan Bill 2025 in Lok Sabha. The bill proposes setting up an overarching higher education commission with three councils for regulation, accreditation, and academic standards. It proposes repealing the present day UGC, AICTE, and NCTE, and it grants strong punitive power to the regulatory council, including imposing penalties on higher education institutions for violating the Act's rules and regulations. Today, we have with us Professor Jagadesh Kumar, former UGC Chairperson, to discuss these major overhaul in the higher education system in India. So, welcome to the print, sir. Thank you so much for joining us today to discuss this bill in detail. So,
Thank you.
first
Thank
of
you.
all,
Yeah.
we would like to know from
Mhm.
you why the proposed changes, why the legislation, and how do you think it is going to overhaul our education system, the higher education system of India?
Fareeha, thank you for inviting me to have a discussion with you. Um, we have to look at the entire education system that India has. It enrolls millions of students, and we have more than 1,200 universities and more than 50,000 colleges. Although during the last 5 years, we have been implementing many reforms in higher education as part of NEP 2020 implementation, many of these institutions struggle with the current regulatory architecture because in practice, we have four major national regulators in our country. UGC is one of them. UGC almost manages nearly 80% of the total number of students in higher education. And then you have the AICTE for technical education. You have NCTE for teacher education, all put together. And then you have the Council of Architecture for the architecture education. These three regulators put together, they supervise over 10%. So we can therefore say that approximately more than 90% of the students in higher education are regulated by these four regulators. But however, many universities which run a technical program, a general program such as BSc or BCom, or a teacher education program, an architecture program, they have to go to multiple regulators. And when you have multiple regulators, obviously there is going to be conflicting regulations and overlapping jurisdictions, and then delays in approvals. So our higher education system actually, although it is moving towards implementing many of these reforms, they are also finding it difficult without a unified, harmonized regulator across the country. And that's the reason why, following the recommendations of NEP 2020, Government of India has decided to bring in this Viksit Bharat Shiksha Adhishthan Bill 2025, and the bill was placed in Parliament, and the Parliament decided to place this bill in front of the Joint Parliamentary Committee so that further discussions can be taken place, and then the Viksit Bharat Shiksha Adhishthan will ultimately be established.
So, what, according to you, are the major reforms proposed under the bill?
As you know, that NEP 2020 says that the regulatory system in our country should be light but tight. What does it mean? What does light mean? Light means that less bureaucratic processes and more autonomy to the institutions which are performing well. And tight means focus on integrity, transparency, and accountability of the educational institutions. So keeping that in mind, we now have one umbrella body known as the Viksit Bharat Shiksha Adhishthan. And under this body, there are going to be three verticals. And one vertical will look after the regulatory aspects of the UGC, AICTE, NCTE, and COA. And then you have the accreditation vertical, which will develop an accreditation ecosystem in our country. And then the third vertical is the standard setting council, which will ensure that the standards across the disciplines are harmonized and implemented. And the third vertical, standard council, will also focus on teacher training, because teachers are the backbone of our educational system. They will also design appropriate training programs to the teachers so that they adopt the appropriate pedagogical approaches to provide experiential learning to the students, so that the students will become problem solvers, critical thinkers, and then build our nation.
There are three regulatory bodies proposed under the bill. How are they going to be different from the existing UGC, AICTE, and CTE? How this is going to be very different from what functions these bodies are performing right now?
You are right, because if you take UGC, for example, UGC performs several things. It comes up with regulations. It also gives approvals for the establishment of the colleges and the universities under 2F and 12B. It also disburses funds to the central universities, and earlier under various schemes to the other universities. And it also sets the standards.
Yeah.
So similarly, AICTE and NCTE. So a single regulator is doing multiple things. The global practice is that increasingly it is felt that to avoid any conflict of interest among the various functions that a single regulator does, it is generally observed, even in higher education literature, that it is prudent to separate these operations and don't put them under the same roof. And that's the reason why the regulatory aspects of UGC, AICTE, NCTE, and COA will come under one regulatory vertical under the Viksit Bharat Shiksha Adhishthan. And
Yeah.
then the accreditation part. Currently, we have several different kinds of accreditation processes taking place in the country. And also, the current NAC is under UGC. Again, that is a conflict of interest. So therefore, the NAC and all the accreditation processes such as NBA and the NIRF, the ranking processes, all of them will be brought under one vertical, and that is the accreditation vertical. And the third one, as I said, is deciding on, for example, the curriculum framework, the national curriculum framework, or national higher education qualification framework, and deciding on the outcome-led education. What should be the outcomes for students as they move from one level to the other level? So deciding these standards. So all these things will be done by the third vertical. So you can clearly see that the functions are clearly demarcated and they are put under each one of these verticals. And the funding is not part of the Viksit Bharat Shiksha Adhishthan. The funding will remain with the respective ministry, in this case, Ministry of Education. So therefore, clearly there is going to be no conflict of interest and more efficiency, more transparency in performing their respective responsibilities.
So at present, UGC does not have much power to penalize institutions in terms of like imposing fines and all. But the bill gives the bill empowers the regulatory council to even penalize institutions up to 2 crore also in case of like violations of norms, right? How do you see this? Because there are people raising concern over this factor and calling it an over regularization probably.
Um, you see, we need to see what are the core objectives of this bill from the perspective of the institutions, from the perspective of the students. Now, overall, if you have these kind of separate verticals and one harmonized umbrella body for regulating and facilitating quality higher education, what does it mean for the students? Because they are the real stakeholders. The students will have very clear benchmarks and open accreditation reports to judge the quality of the colleges and universities where they want to study, even if they are coming from rural areas and small tier 2, tier 3 towns, so that they can make informed choices on where to enroll. And in the bill, you also might have seen that the bill recommends establishment of a transparent and easily accessible grievance mechanism, grievance redressal mechanism for the students, because students for various reasons, they are also under academic pressure. They want to do well in their education. They want to work after they pass out of their university. So they also undergo all kinds of anxieties. They also undergo stress. So therefore, it is important to address the student issues. So as part of this new regulatory body, every institution should mandatorily have a student grievance redressal system. And one more important thing that you will see in the bill is that the student feedback is given important priority. Students can provide feedback on, for example, the academic quality, the infrastructure that is available, the governance quality of the institution, in general about their campus life, the hostel life, and so on. And this student feedback will become a formal input for accreditation and ranking. So what will happen then? The institutions will become more accountable and more responsible to the mental and physical well-being of the students, and also they will provide good quality education to the students. So this is from the students' perspective. Now, if you look at the institutions, the Viksit Bharat Shiksha Adhishthan, it promises both simplification and also greater autonomy for those who perform well. Today, many universities, they find themselves caught between multiple regulators, and they need to upload this data to different agencies. It could be NIRF, it could be accreditation, AICTE, UGC, and so on. Now, the new scheme proposes that we will have one single portal, a digital dashboard, where all institutions had to upload their information, and this will be publicly available so that everybody can examine it. What are the things that they need to publish? They need to, key facts such as the finances, to the faculty strength, to what kind of courses they are offering, what are the qualifications of their teachers, and then the audited accounts of the institution. All this data has to be the kind of courses that are offering, what are the outcomes of the education that they are providing, such as what is the employment rate for their students, how many students are moving to the higher education. So all this data which is of public interest has to be uploaded on this single portal maintained by this framework. Now, whenever regulators need any particular data for any institution, or the rating institutions or the accreditation institutions want the data, they can just access the data from this one single portal. So therefore, you can see that because it is publicly available, and then various regulators and the accreditators and ranking organizations are constantly looking at this data, it becomes very important for the institutions to meet the standards, and then once they fulfill these standards, or if they perform better than the set minimum standards, they will gain greater academic freedom and then self-governance. And that is what we want ultimately. We don't expect that we will have an opportunity to actually take action on any institution. We believe that our educational institutions are very responsible, and they want to serve our country by providing high quality education. So through this public disclosure of mandatory information, we expect that all the institutions will become accountable and responsible.
More responsible. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sir,
yeah.
as you must have also seen in Parliament also, there are some concern over like
Mhm.
centralization of power when it comes to higher education. And there are concern because the bill also says that the final say will be of the central government. How do you
Mhm.
see this?
This is something that we need to discuss because what you are saying is not actually reflected in the draft bill. If you look at the architecture of this bill, in all the three verticals and also the umbrella body, which is the top body under which these three verticals are there. In each one of them, you have representatives from the state governments. You will have well-known academicians, subject experts. So it's a kind of a roundtable collaboration rather than centralization of any power within one regulator. The state governments can continue to establish their universities. They can continue to fund their universities. They can continue to start new programs in their universities. However, wherever there are standards which are of national level, and then which are decided in a collaborative manner in consultation with the state higher education councils and state governments, this is going to be a collective and collaborative effort rather than a top-down approach. So therefore, there is no centralization of any regulation in this architecture.
So as of now, UGC has been granting grants to higher education institutions, universities, and colleges.
Mhm.
But under the new bill, there is no such provision. So how will it work?
See, if you look at the universities, there are three kinds of universities, right? One kind of universities are central universities and the deemed to be universities, which are established by the central government.
Yeah.
And most of the deemed to be universities are private universities. About 6 or 7 deemed to be universities are funded by the central government. And similarly, we have close to about 45 central universities under Ministry of Education. And then you have the IITs, NITs, and ISERs and other institutions of national importance. So for all the central government INIs, the Ministry of Education directly gives the funding. And this funding is required for salaries and maintenance and so on. So it directly goes. And in the case of the central universities, the funding used to come from the ministry to the UGC, and then UGC used to transfer the fund to the central universities. Now what will happen is under the new scheme, because the new Adhishthan, it doesn't handle funds or fund distribution. For the central universities also, the Ministry of Education will disburse the funds. Now look
Directly.
at the state universities. In the case of the state universities, again, you have two kinds of universities there. The private universities, which manage themselves, and then the state-funded universities. In the case of the state-funded universities, whether in the earlier model or in the current model, the state governments will continue to give the funds for their salaries, for their infrastructure, for their maintenance, and so on. So those funds will go there. Now, when it comes to the research funding, you already have the Ansandhan National Research Foundation, which disperses funds based on a competitive proposals and evaluation, both to the state universities, whether they are state funded or private, and the central universities and INIs. So therefore, you have the Anusandhan National Research Foundation, which funds the research activities, and the respective state governments will continue to fund their respective state universities, and the central government will continue to fund the centrally funded institutions. So therefore, there is not much difference in terms of the funding.
Okay, so it will be now direct from the Ministry of Education to these central universities, right?
Right, right.
So there are critics who are saying that this is like one size fit all situation because
Mhm.
now the technical and non-technical institutions will be under the same body, right? So
Mhm.
I want to know your opinion about it. Will there be some conflict when it comes to regularize like technical and non-technical institutions together?
Absolutely not. In fact, now the challenge on the existing system is that in universities also you have schools of engineering, which are part of the university, and they don't come under AICTE. AICTE majorly regulates the standalone engineering colleges. So now this can actually create a conflict. For example, AICTE has regulations on minimum qualifications for engineering faculty in engineering colleges. And UGC has minimum qualifications regulations for faculty in all disciplines in the university system. Now imagine that a university has an affiliated college, engineering college, and also its own school of engineering. Now, the regulations on minimum qualifications are going to be different for an affiliated college and for a school of engineering in the university itself. So, this will actually create problems. In the new system, what will happen is the minimum qualifications for faculty members, whether they are affiliated engineering colleges or it is a school of engineering or general education, you can have harmonized one single regulation for the minimum qualifications. So therefore, it will actually reduce any difficulties that are currently faced by the present system.
Got it. So the bill states that all institutions of national importance will come under its ambit. And
Right.
these institutions, INIs, include IITs and IIMs also. As of now, IITs and IIMs are not regulated by UGC.
Correct.
So does it means that IIT and IIMs will also be regulated by the new bill?
You see, the bill very categorically mentions that the current autonomy of the institutions of national importance will be protected. Meaning that since if there are no institutions which are performing very well, the bill already says whether they are an INIs or university system, they will have increased autonomy, increased self-governance. There will not be, micromanagement of these institutions. Ultimately, the bill envisages that the proposed regulating system will be more facilitative in nature rather than a top-down approach. And also in the bill, in each of these three verticals and also in the umbrella body, the Viksit Bharat Shiksha Adhishthan, there will be representation from the INIs also. So
Yeah.
therefore, their inputs will be taken, and the state government's inputs will be taken. The experts will inputs will be taken, and then whether these are regulations or guidelines, they will be collectively formulated so that the existing institutions' autonomy and self-governance is not affected.
Understood. So they will be under the ambit, but their autonomy will be protected.
Right.
Thank you so much, sir, for your insight. It was a very insightful discussion with you on this very important educational reform we are going to see in India soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much.